I would like to end today by talking about one of these sculptors who I was totally enamored with when I discovered him in Rome. And that is Gian Lorenzo Bernini, as they say. They say it so like beautifully. Bernini. And I've been calling myself a Bernini Queenie after encountering his work. For those who are new to Timeless, A, welcome. B, as you can probably tell, we cover news and politics in this show, but it's also really, really important to me to cover things and talk about things that have nothing to do with news and nothing to do with politics, that are just cool aspects of life that I think that everyone should know, because we are a disenchanted country. It's really a big problem with us, where we don't have a sense of vitality and zest for life. And there are so many cool things and people and artists and handwriting analysis experts and magicians and who else have I had on my show? FBI and CIA agents. Life is a spectacular array of options. So it's very important to me to bring some of that. And this guy, Bernini, holy moly, talk about spectacular. When I saw some of his statues in the Borghese Museum, I took out my notes app, as I did in the Sistine Chapel, finding out that OJ died, and I wrote one sentence, and that is, human beings can do superhuman things. They can. If they put their mind to it, if they are doing it in service of something higher than themselves, and if they really work hard and learn and prove themselves on their own merits, they can do superhuman things. So let's look at this guy. This is a self-portrait of Gian Lorenzo Bernini. He lived from 1598 to 1680. So he was right after the time of Michelangelo, or as I have been told, Michelangelo. Apparently that is the proper way to pronounce it. Michelangelo lived from 1475 to 1564. And so Michelangelo was obviously one of the most famous Renaissance artists. People don't really know this about him because Michelangelo was most famous for painting the Sistine Chapel, but he was a sculptor first and foremost. That's why, by the way, a lot of the figures on the Sistine Chapel are very muscular, and there's a lot of focus on the figures as opposed to the natural surroundings. It's because Michelangelo was a sculptor first. But Michelangelo lived during the time of the Renaissance, where the priority in art and in sculpture was to glorify and sort of make perfect the human body. Make the human body look incredibly elegant and flawless. And that proved the magnificence of the human body, but also the magnificence of the sculptor.
Also, huge white supremacist. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, yeah.
Michelangelo,
right.
Huge white supremacist.
Oh, you know what's so funny? Sean is referencing a clip that we played on this show of Robin
Robin
DiAngelo
yeah.
saying, when you go into the Sistine Chapel, it's the epitome of white supremacy. And she goes, who's that god in the center touching David? It's touching Adam. Oh my gosh. But you know, it's funny. When I was in the Sistine Chapel, I thought of Robin DiAngelo. I thought, why am I thinking about this lady in this holy place? And then OJ died, and I saw that OJ died. I'm going, why am I thinking about OJ?
You traveled with such interesting companions.
I know. I know. I was looking up at God reaching out with Adam, and I thought of Robin DiAngelo. 21st century experience of the Sistine Chapel. But, you know, so Michelangelo, this is really important, the distinctions between Bernini and Michelangelo. Bernini was heavily influenced by Michelangelo, and he was called the Michelangelo of his time. But Bernini was a Baroque artist, whereas Michelangelo in the Renaissance focused on the perfection of the human body. Let's look, for instance, at his very famous statue of David in the contrapposto stance. It's very elegant. It's obviously, you know, magnificent in terms of the execution and the anatomy of the body. But it's sort of like a museum piece. It's elegant, it's perfect, and it's kind of like distant from you a bit. There isn't really emotion in it. The Baroque was different. The Baroque was much more opulent and prioritized emotion more than the Renaissance. And we so see that in Bernini's work. Bernini's work, if nothing else, just projects emotion and movement, crucially. It's not these like perfect stances. All of his work, there is intense movement. There's an action happening right at that very moment. But just a super quick continuing background of Bernini. He was commissioned by several popes to work on various pieces of art, not just Catholic art, but as you're going to see, sculptures that are from Greek myths, which are spectacular. And then Bernini was actually commissioned by one of the popes to build a symbolic structure over the tomb of St. Peter in St. Peter's Basilica. And that is the main canopy in St. Peter's Basilica that Bernini did. He also did some other pillars and statues in St. Peter's. He also worked very much on the facade of St. Peter's in the Vatican. But then he fell out of favor with the Pope and he didn't finish some of the projects, and that was a time of turmoil. And but then at the end of his life, he was continuing to be commissioned to do these fantastic works. Quick thing personally about Bernini, because it's always interesting to learn about the inside lives of these individuals. Bernini was a very pious man. I mean, in order to create such spectacular religious art, you not only needed to be insanely talented, but you needed to be so sincere and deep in your belief to want to do that and execute it in such a holy way. But Bernini was not without his unholy moments. For instance, he was having a relationship with a woman, and he found out that his brother, Luigi, was also having a relationship with that woman. He then went and chased Luigi. I love this, it's so Italian. He went and chased a Luigi all around Rome, like literally was chasing him all around Rome when he found out, to beat him up. And then Luigi found refuge in one of the great churches, the Santa Maria Maggiore, which, by the way, Bernini is buried in. Luigi fended off the physical threats of his brother. But then Bernini sent one of his henchmen to go slit the face of the girl with a razor. And that person marred her face for having the affair. She was put in prison for adultery. Bernini was put in prison for having a henchman try to and successfully slit her face. But then, because Bernini was such a fantastic sculptor, the Pope, maybe not formally, but essentially pardoned him, and then he continued his work. So if I were a super radical leftist, I wouldn't continue to even talk about or acknowledge the brilliance and genius of Bernini because he did such a terrible thing. But since this is a nuanced show, we can walk forward with a nuanced understanding of this guy, and nevertheless a deep admiration for his absolute brilliance. Let's look at a few Berninis.